After setting up and administering human smuggling and cocaine shipments from Venezuela to Mexico, Fernando Blenquio Cesena told reporter Menyo Larios that he planned to take an extended vacation to attend the 2006 World Cup in Germany.
I, king of the world and a huge soccer fan, was in the process of buying a Falcon 50 to fly directly to Germany and enjoy the World Cup with my friends. I decided to cease operations starting February 2006, so that nothing could get in the way of my World Cup dream.
But, well, it seems that the profit motive got in the way.
One of the partners, Frangel Negro, insisted on doing a vuelta. So, he keeps insisting and talks me into it. And I decide to send that plane to Mexico with 5 tons.
That plane, of course, was the infamous Cocaine One that was busted in Ciudad del Carmen in April 2006. In our first episode, we heard from the Mexican government's press conference announcing the bust, and from then Florida-based reporter Howard Altman, who first looked into both the local owners and the history of the plane. Now, we'll hear how the man who claims to be responsible for that ill-fated shipment tells the story. Blenquio says that he already had the DC-9 available in St. Petersburg, Florida. He says that he had planned to use that plane for flights to Africa. Alberto Damiani, a Venezuelan pilot then living in Miami, flew the plane to Caracas on April 5th. Damiani delivered it to Blenquio at the Maiquetía International Airport with a no-fly report. That report detailed a number of mechanical issues that would need to be repaired before the plane could be flown again. Blenquio says that he gave the task of overseeing the repairs to a Venezuelan pilot who worked for him. This pilot hired a team of aircraft mechanics from a private company located at the airport. Blenquio says that he sent his second wife and son off on a vacation and took a weekend trip to Cartagena, Colombia, with his Miss Germany girlfriend and her parents. He says he then returned to Caracas the following Monday, loaded the DC-9 with the 5+ tons of cocaine, and sent it off. He and his cohort were happy, he says, with the DC-9's on-time departure. But then they got a call. The plane had a mechanical failure and was on its way back.
System failure.
The details get a bit murky here, but Blenquio says that the DC-9 full of cocaine took off from Caracas, and then turned around and came back, and then took off again, and returned yet again to the Caracas airport due to various mechanical failures. In Blenquio's interviews with Menyo Larios, he described those mechanical failures a bit differently. First, he said, the plane had a problem with the cabin door pressure, and then a second problem with one of the wheels, and then finally, a third problem with the brakes. In a subsequent round of interviews, which were used in Detective's Spanish-language podcast and translated for this podcast, Blenquio described the plane's various mishaps as follows.
Once the landing flare problem is solved, the micro switches adjusted, we test that it works. They leave again. We're more relaxed and concerned because the problem is fixed.
And then the plane had to turn around and fly back a second time.
Almost an hour goes by, and the plane comes back again. Only this time, the main door hadn't sealed correctly, and the cabin was losing pressure. For heaven's sake.
Blenquio says that the plane was then further damaged when it landed back in Caracas that second time.
When it lands a second time, both landings with a full load of drugs and fuel tanks practically at capacity, one of the brakes was damaged, a problem impossible to fix at such late hours.
Blenquio emphasizes that the plane took off and turned around, got repaired, and then took off again and turned around a second time, only to get parked and await further repairs, all while loaded with 128 suitcases of cocaine.
Imagine a plane packed with 5 tons of cocaine in the platform, a plane on the runway, right under everyone's noses, man. It was laughable.
During the Mexican government's April 11, 2006 press conference announcing the drug bust, General Carlos Demetrio Gaitan said that Mexican authorities had detected anomalies with the plane because it had taken off, communicated its flight plan, and then turned around without explaining why. General Gaitan said that the plane then took off again and flew on to Mexico. That is, according to the Mexican government, the plane only returned to Caracas once, not twice, as Blenquio describes. Here's General Gaitan from that press conference.
Esta aeronave despega de Venezuela, se informa al centro de control Mérida, entonces se está esperando a la aeronave como un vuelo normal, legal, como un vuelo legal. Y sin embargo, aproximadamente a la hora y media de haber despegado, regresa a Venezuela. No se explica cuál fue el motivo por el que regresa, no se informa de alguna avería. Lo cierto es que vuelve a aterrizar y posteriormente vuelve a despegar con destino a México, ratificando su plan de vuelo inicial.
Regardless of how many times the plane turned around and came back, and of what exactly broke down when, Blenquio tells the tale of a private, US-owned aircraft with over 5 tons of cocaine lining the aisles, basically flying in circles and falling apart over a Venezuela then in the heyday of Hugo Chávez's 14-year Bolivarian Revolution. Until finally, on April 10, 2006, the plane would take off and make the flight to its scheduled stopover in Ciudad del Carmen and the waiting arms of the Mexican army. As we approach the end of this podcast, I'd like to address one of the difficulties and potential pitfalls of working on a global, multi-billion-dollar industry that is designed to be officially invisible. An industry whose workers, executives, and security forces are mostly armed to the teeth and to some extent trained and guaranteed impunity when enforcing the laws of official invisibility. In the realm of transnational illegal drug trafficking and drug policing, information is as much of a commodity as all the wildly popular, oblivion or euphoria-inducing chemical compounds. Everyone in the business, from the drug producers, shippers, dealers, and consumers, to the drug police, prosecutors, and legislators, is on the lookout for the best deal, the information that will get them out of jail or ruin their competitor's latest venture, or make their career, or get them reelected, or save their life. The global drug and drug war industries depend on the always shifting submarkets of information. And one of the main features of those submarkets is this: everyone lies, at least some of the time. Or, perhaps more accurately, the best, the most successful entrepreneurs in the transnational illegal drug industry combine truth and lies seamlessly. This leads the reporter, interested in evading lies, to a pessimistic rule of thumb. Don't trust anyone who makes their living in this industry. Don't trust the self-proclaimed narco who wants to feed you a story. Don't trust the government press releases and statements. Don't trust the court files and police reports. Don't trust any of them. My name, so I'm told, is John Gibler, and this, in a sense, is Transportista. Episode 9, Cocaine 1 Revisited. While I was looking into Blenquio's story, reporter Menyo Lario sent me a link to a Venezuelan court decision from April 30th, 2009. This document, which Menyo found during his initial research into Blenquio's story, which I hadn't seen referenced anywhere else, contains Venezuelan police reports from their 2006 investigation into the DC-9. These reports include police interviews with both government and private airport workers. Like all such government documents composed of interviews that could have taken place under duress or torture or negotiation, it must be taken as a matrix of possible lies and truths rather than as a straight record of the truth. One thing that sticks out, for example, is the testimony of a couple of mechanics saying they worked on the plane, had access to its interior, and did not see any suitcases, much less 128 of them, inside the cabin. That contradicts Blenquio's statement that they had loaded the plane with cocaine before the first takeoff, and that the plane and the coke were sitting right there on the tarmac the whole time the plane was being repaired. However, the numerous and varied testimonies contained in the court document largely coincide with Blenquio's description of the plane's misadventures. Several of the mechanics describe seeing a man with a Mexican accent around the plane. Those mechanics say that they received $1,000 in cash for working on the plane on their spare time. That is, of course, off the books. The court document includes airport fee receipts and landing and takeoff permission documents, all in the name of Royal Sons, Inc., the Florida-based company with the weird political connections. Recall that Fred Geffen told reporters that he had just sold the plane through a broker and had no idea who the buyer was. That statement seems impossible to sustain, given both the documents contained in the Venezuelan case file and Blenquio's story. The court document also includes a number of receipts and permissions from 2005 and early 2006 for the Falcon 20 airplane that Blenquio says he sent to Ciudad del Carmen to wait for the DC-9.
I had sent my Falcon 20, the Extra Bravo India Yankee Kilo. I had sent the Federal Police Commander and other officials to prepare, so to say, the technical stopover that the DC-9 with the drugs had to make in Ciudad del Carmen.
This seems to corroborate at least a bit of Blenquio's tale of running drug and human smuggling flights between Caracas and Toluca. The court document also includes the testimony of Alberto Damiani, who flew the DC-9 to Venezuela. Damiani describes meeting Raul Jimenez, a man with a Mexican accent and a gold Rolex with a leather band, he said. His story also coincides with Blenquio's. When I first spoke with Daniel Hopsicker, the Cocaine One chronicler based in Florida, I mentioned the Venezuelan court document to him. He asked if I'd send it to him, and I did. I then called him back, summarized Blenquio's story, and asked him what he thought.
As far as it goes, the story that he told you seems to, in major ways, match what the Venezuelan investigation into the DC-9 plane related. But the Venezuelans, of course, have their own axe to grind, and we're happy to release the information that Frederick Geffen, the Skyway communications principal, who actually owned the DC-9 when it was busted, had a previous encounter with the DEA. And I met this guy. Okay, I mean, did not surprise me at all. These are like middle management executives, part of the American drug cartel, right? One of the American drug lords, which we're not supposed to have.
Wait a minute. Geffen worked with the DEA? It seems so. In fact, the DEA report is why Meño sent me the Venezuelan court document in the first place, and why I mentioned it to Hopsicker. The court document summarizes a DEA report sent to Venezuela on May 5, 2006, and signed by Paul Aboulsamra, who is currently listed on LinkedIn as a criminal investigator at the Department of Justice. In this report, the DEA states that Fred Geffen was an airplane businessman working with drug traffickers, while also working as a DEA source, all the way back in 1995. Royal Sons transferred the ownership of the DC-9 to Fred Geffen, the individual, on March 31, 2006. At that time, according to Blenquio, the plane was ready and waiting for his use. The DEA report also links Fernando Blenquio Cesena and his Guadalajara-based business to the alias Raul Jimenez Alfaro, to the Falcon 20, and to previous flights between Mexico and Venezuela. So, the DEA both knew and informed Venezuelan authorities that Blenquio was Raul back in May 2006. The DEA also told Venezuelan authorities that Fred Geffen was connected to both drug flights and the DEA going back to 1995. U.S. authorities did not charge Geffen with any crimes related to the 5+ tons of cocaine found on his plane in Ciudad del Carmen, nor did they charge Fernando Blenquio Cesena. What does this all amount to? When I recounted Blenquio's small-time, catch-me-if-you-can-esque tale of Miss Germany Cartagena, the 2006 World Cup, and the Jalopy DC-9 to Daniel Hopsicker, he was not impressed. One of the first things he said to me was this:
The American drug lords are the story here, and he hasn't told you anything about that, has he?
Next time Transportista is a Detective production with Exile Content Studio in partnership with iHeartRadio's My Cultura podcast network. Directed and narrated by John Gibler. Transportista's voice by Joaquin Cosillo. Editing and sound design by Fernando de la Rosa and Pedro G. Garcia. Reporting by John Gibler and Menyo Larios. Produced by Julio Gonzalez. Voice recording by Hugo Merino and Rene Garcia. Transportista's interviews translated by Carla Ruiz Argaiz. Production supervision by Nando Vila and Álvaro Céspedes. Associate producers Alonso Aguilar and Alejandro Duran. Diego Enrique Osorno is the creator and executive producer along with Daniel Eilenberg and Isaac Lee. Executive producers for iHeartMedia are Connell Byrne and Giselle Bunces. For more podcasts from iHeart, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.